many more of those throughout the evening. Hey everyone, how's it going? It is I, the real Randy Chavez. I'm coming at you today with a podcast of Carl Choi of 24/7 Comics, Will Quintana as well. Everyone say hello to Dashi. Hello, Dashi. Commenting, liking, subscribing is a free way to help support the channel. Non-free ways are Patreon, special super thanks button down below. And yeah, so we were just going over the most recent comic, which unfortunately, if you guys haven't been able to read any of your comics today, it's not just with the 247 comics. I tried it with Sanity. I tried it with one of the Aliens vs. Avengers comics. And the comic reader app seems to have a bug where it only shows like 2 or 3 pages throughout the entire comic. So they will hopefully be working on that soon.
I think all the resources went to VeVeverse. So like all the pages got sucked into VeVeverse, and now we can't see them. But yo, Randy, always thank you for having us. Today we're here to talk about another drop on VeVe, our favorite digital collectibles platform. And for those who we haven't met before, this is Carl Choi from 24/7 Comics. I'm the publisher, co-founder, and I'm very excited to also introduce my colleague, Will Quintana, who is the colorist and co-creator of Zero Ghost. And today we're dropping Zero Ghost #2 on VeVe.
Got mine. I got my 1 and 2. So it wasn't my interview. I was reading an interview from this one artist called Natsuki Takaya, mangaka, that created Fruits Basket, and somebody asked her just how she came up with like the look of the characters, and she said one day this little girl popped up in her head and said, "Hello, I'm Toru," and the rest was history. So for the art, like obviously storyline is one thing. I feel like with me writing my comic, writing is the easy part, and then just the art is completely different. Did you base these characters off anyone, or were there people that they just, hey, I need this person to do this, therefore the character should look like this? Let me know how you got in the mindset.
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak for Justin and Brian since they're not here. So Justin wrote the comic and co-created alongside Brian, who penciled and inked the art. And a lot of the characters came from inspiration surrounding the worlds of like John Wick, Big Trouble in Little China, cyberpunk. I mean, those are all kind of like keywords that came to mind. But we wanted to do something that was like very relatable and international, and had wanted a backdrop that allowed for a really cool world building opportunity. And a lot of it comes from like thinking about what's a great international city. And to me, I grew up in Hong Kong, and that to me is one of the most international cities ever. So Ranga. And so because of that, like when we started thinking about this world and the characters and the development, we thought Hong Kong would have been the perfect place. And so that's kind of the origins of the creation. But one of the biggest pieces surrounding, hey, Sanjay, what's up? One of the biggest pieces surrounding Zero Ghost, and often we get a lot of people when they open up the book and like, oh, shoot, it's the colors. And so I think Will was very intentional in collaborating with Brian in a way more intimate level than what most, books will see, and it's really surrounding the colors. And so maybe we'll have Aranga introduce himself really quickly. He's going to be, he's definitely a highlight. I want him to share more of a story. But then Aranga, do a quick intro, and then I want to go to Will and have Will share more about his collaborative efforts with Brian and how that's different when he works with the big two, because I think that's very important for this book.
Okay, I'll be brief. I'm an artist. I work on comic book covers. Not really a whole lot of interior. A lot of interiors. Bunch of commissions. Yeah, that's and I'm fortunate enough to have done the variant cover or one of the variant covers for issue 2 of Zero Ghost, which I'm a big fan of. Short and sweet, Carl.
Yep, perfect. And Ranga will share. We'll get to you more, but I want Will to share more to answer Randy's question, really surrounding the world design of it all. And maybe Will, a good context is, you work with a lot of the big twos like DC, Marvel, and whatnot. And one of the things that was really special about this collaboration was, as a colorist, often you're just handed everything afterwards. But in this case, you're able to work really closely with Brian. So it'd be kind of cool, I think, if you talk about the two worlds and how they're different and why this is special.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 24/7 is unique in the sense that I worked very closely with Brian He came up with a lot of the character designs, but he and I discussed the world building environment, the sort of colors and values that we wanted to see as far as the palette, maybe some of the designs. But once he and I went through issue one, and because it was our first time working with one another, so of course with any, in any sort of relationship, work relationship, there's going to be that sort of I don't know, that probationary period, that sort of, that learning period, that learning curve. So working with, I'm not used to that, having worked with the big two. It's very few and far between that I'm able to actually collaborate with the artist. Typically, when it comes to, the big two, much like Carl described, it's a, it's relay between the editor and the artist, and then the artist might, you know say something to the editor and they try to relay it to me. It's, and I've not ever been comfortable with that, because not many people know of cross-gen comics, but I got an early start with cross-gen comics right after Valiant, and that's what actually brought me out to Florida. And it was a company that was started up by a fan of the industry, and he wanted to compete with the big two. And so he got some of the best talent from around the world. He was getting cats from like Italy and London and stuff, Jim Chung, Greg Land. And so we all worked in the studio. We all worked in this quad environment where we were no more than like 10 feet from one another. So we could discuss everything on a daily basis. And so that's just something that just doesn't, it rarely exists when it comes to the big two. It's like, maybe if you find, an artist that you click with and they collab with you, then, they hit you up, they DM you, they email you, and then you start communicating a lot more. And then you get a feel for what their likes are and what their dislikes are, what, the aesthetics of their work and stuff like that. So, because every artist is different, and I try to approach every artist differently. So, point being, that's what made working with Brian great. Brian was very forward in his approach. He wanted to collaborate. Like, it was important for both Brian and myself to put out the best product possible. We wanted to put something out there that just like blew the doors off of what you see on the stands these days. We wanted to put something out there where what you see on the cover is what you're going to see on the interiors as well, which is a rarity as well.
Yeah,
So,
I've noticed that as well.
yeah, and listen, it's we all know the reasons for it and stuff like that, but the difference being, with 24/7, you know, what you see is what you get, you know, even down to the paper quality, to
Yeah,
like quote David Portnoy, there's no flop. You don't see a flop on these, periodicals. We started coining them as floppies, because they flop over. That's the quality of the paper, or the lack of in those instances. Whereas with what we put out there, it's like almost like cardstock quality, you know?
Oh, dude, it's actually a great reminder, Will. For
Hmm.
everyone who bought on VeVe today, if you get an ultra rare, go to 24/7 Comics HQ on X, and I don't know what the process is, but the team did a post today where if you have an ultra rare, you can actually redeem a physical. So we'll ship you a physical.
Oh,
Zero Ghost #2.
yeah,
So our whole
Nice.
thing is I'm a traditionalist when it comes to collecting, so I like the physical, but I also love. And oh, there we go, Sanjay, you
You
got
go.
one on your way, and I already have your address, so you got it's on the way. And so for us, like I embrace the world. Like I know that there is a growing and fast growing collectors of digital assets. And then on the other end, I think for me, I'm still a traditional. So I'm always trying to bring the two worlds together. Like Iranga and I, we met in this traditional world, but I'm pulling him in by having him do, covers for, the digital world. Because I feel like as a friend and for him as an artist, it's also really important for his exposure as he's kind of embarking on this journey to make sure he has this audience, right? I think it's really rare to say like we had our first in-store signing last August as kind of a pilot, and then before that we never even released one physical item, and we had 250 people come out like getting stuff signed, and they and I would say probably like 70% came from our digital audience, and they end up buying the books, the physical books there to get signed. And for me, that's like the best case scenario in how this ecosystem can kind of operate together. So you know, a lot of the things that are happening today, and we could talk more into it. You know, I think is teed up for that. But yeah, Randy, hope that answers your question in the longest way possible.
Yeah, that was great. So there's the comic industry's changing so much. You had the diamond distributors or diamond publishers kind of go under, and then even like digitally, where people try to say like, okay, we can tell which way the wind is blowing, it's all going to be digital eventually. And then, you know, Dark Horse Comics, they closed down their digital store, and it's like, man, it's rough out there. So obviously there's a lot of competition. The cream, like you guys will rise to the top and you'll all be fine. But do you think there might be opportunities for, not necessarily collaborations, but could 247 Comics and thus have more work for you guys? Could you maybe absorb another smaller comic book agency? Be like, hey, we like your IP, and then let's go in and kind of just add it to our repertoire? Or is that something that is like, we have our own stuff, we have enough of our own stuff, we don't want to be taking on anyone else's right now?
To be honest, I don't know if we're one. I don't think we're big enough for sure. We're still like a little engine that could. But two, you know, I just attended Comics Pro a few weeks back, and Comics Pro is basically the yearly retail conference where publishers actually pitch their slate to comic book shop retailers. And they said this was one of the largest years of independent publishers, meaning, you know, IDW had a massive layoffs. You know, obviously Marvel and DC went off their rounds of layoffs, and you know, a sprinkle of people from those layoffs started their publishing company. I mean, another one would be like Boom. They got sold to Penguin Random House, and you know, the president at Boom basically launched a new imprint. So I think it's the rise of the indies. I think that's gonna be this era, and I think it's gonna be a special time, because what's been really cool for us was just hearing the pitches from all these other indies of like publisher that's been in the business for like 20 plus years and 30 plus years. The ones that we feel aligned with pretty much came to the same conclusion as to where 24/7 Comics is strategically. So it was very validating for us to know that even though we're small potatoes and we're new to all this, we arrived to very similar conclusions as to like what the industry is going to look and feel like moving forward. But ultimately for us, we also follow the creatives, right? We work with guys like Iranga, with Will, Brian, Justin to, you know, put out stories that inspires them. And, you know, the last thing I want to do is, you know, force anyone to do what they don't want to do. And, you know, Iranga, even I just send you the books, and I'd be like, draw whichever cover, read them, and then draw whichever cover that inspires you, you know? And I think that's usually the nature of like how we like to work, because we do feel like if you give artists choice, like they're going to do their best work.
Agreed. And when you guys go in and do, there's no difference between drawing a cover for like a physical and then one for digital, right? It's all just self-drawn.
I work traditionally. So the cover I did for Zero Ghost says it's pen and ink. I should have actually had it ready here, but it's pen and ink and ink wash, and then, you know, you just scan it and convert it into digital. For me, there's really no difference whether I do a cover that's going to be for a digital comic or a traditional comic. I like the feel of pen on paper. I'm just a dinosaur in that regards. I will say it's funny we're talking about digital comics and stuff like that, because it's been almost a decade now that my comic book reading has gone exclusively digital.
Same.
Right? I just ran out of. I mean, it was either that or I'd have to get like a side piece apartment because my wife was losing her mind. She was like, "This has got to stop." So now it's just on my iPad and I get to like read it on there. But like when we were talking about it and I asked you, hey, there's going to be a physical book, right? Because whenever I do covers, I like to have, a couple of comps and I like to have that something that I can hold in my hand and show people. And then when Carl told me it was a digital thing, it just like my mind couldn't bridge that gap. Like, hey, I read digital comics. Like that's all I read anymore. But I just wanted to have a physical copy of it because it was something that I contributed to, so it's there's that dimension to it for me. But it's really interesting, like kind of what you're doing here with the digital releases, because if anything else, we need this readership to skew younger, right? We've got to get it to skew younger, and if this is the way to do it and to hook them, and maybe that leads them to pick up a traditional book, I don't know. We need to do something. So everybody that's broadening the approach, like I'm all for it, man. I'm here to support every initiative.
Whatever grows the hobby.
100%. Anything that gets more of these stories into the hands of younger readers, not like guys who are in their mid 40s like I am, but younger readers.
Speaking of growing audiences, Irango, if it's not too much trouble, I'd love for you to pull your physical, your the cover to show people what it looks like.
Yeah. Give me a couple seconds. It's somewhere in my portfolio. I'm gonna pull it out. Okay.
Of course.
Awesome. I see it. I think it'd be great because I do feel like as much as everyone like sees his work digitally, like Iranga's work is beautiful. Like
I'm curious what he has in the back there. Is that his work in the back, or is that just stuff that he has from other?
So him and I are like in the comic art collecting space. That's where we met, and then he could probably tell you all about what he has in the back.
Alex Ross. It says cover to Amazing Spider-Man. I couldn't tell you what the issue is. This is Liam Shaw's cover to Incredible Hulk 425. It's like one of my crown jewels, man. You can't see the rest. Like up there, I've got some Travis Charest, some Daniel Warren Johnson. I really should not be having these originals up on walls. We get like the other day we had a tornado alert again. It's that time of year, and all I wanted to do was like my wife's like, all right, let's get into like the area with the dogs and whatever. And I'm just thinking of, hey, let's get as much art as I can off the walls. So I'm really at that point where I should technically make like really high quality copies and put them up in frames and just keep everything in my portfolios that I can quickly grab. I think my wife's tired of it. We have a really tiny central room where we go in case of an emergency. And the other day I had like frames in there, and it's like my wife and I and our two dogs, and she was just like, this has got to stop. So I feel it. We gotta get. So I gotta do something else there. But this is the physical art.
So sick.
I'll put it out there. It's all gorgeous. Like pen and ink, and there's some white ink wash. So I just love it, man. I mean, it's one of my favorite things I've done as far as a published thing goes, and it means a lot. I'm gonna get myself into trouble saying this, but there have been occasionally covers I've done for books that I was like, I couldn't really care much about. I was a fan of this ever since Carl had I got a preview look at this, and so it hit different doing a cover for something for a book that I really enjoy the content for. So anyone else I did covers for, I'm not talking about your book when I said that.
Nice.
Yeah, I love Alex Ross. Like, I got one of his things in San Diego in 22, I think. It was the one where you have I think Ghost Rider on one end, like a bunch of the main Marvel heroes, Spider-Man, Wolverine in the middle, and then Fantastic Four on the other end. Yeah, it's like one of 250, I think. pretty awesome. I love him. I love his work.
The Giclées,
I don't know what it was called.
the high quality prints, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's crazy what those go for as well. It's nuts.
yeah, mine wasn't. I forget what it was. I mean, but it was a few years ago. They sold out. It's probably worth more now. It's actually not here with me. It's actually in a place in New York. So I gotta go grab that at some point.
Gotcha.
Yeah. What about you, Will? What was one of your favorite parts about working on this comic? Which part stuck out to you?
It was actually issue 2, because I had taken a bit of a break between issues 1 and 2, and there was like something that happened with me, and there was like a point of like epiphany where something sort of clicked with me and the colors and with Brian's style and stuff, and it was like kind of like issue 2 was kind of different. It was like difficult to describe, but it was like a big step forward from issue 1. I don't know if people will actually notice that between issues 1 and 2, but for me, there was a huge shift in my style
Okay.
and in my approach to those pages, starting with issue 2.
I will let you know. I haven't been able to read the second one because the app is like down right now. The reader app is, but once I do, I'll let you. I'm excited to read it. I was like, oh man, I was so bummed about it before because you dropped a bit of like lore with the 5 families going on, and then okay, like what are they going to do with? Seems like her dad is a little bit of a hard ass, and I'm just curious. Like, there's so many unanswered questions. Like, okay, I was curious to read it, and then I wasn't able to. I was like, oh, it's killing me.
Sorry, man. Damn technology.
I got lucky because I got to work on this cover, and like so I got a three issue preview of what was going on, and I told Will this like last year when we did the stream for the Kickstarter for the book. It's so rare that like one of the first things that your eye gets drawn to is the colors. At least for me, like I'm immediately drawn into like the pencil and ink work, like what that looks like, and then obviously, you know, they say like if it's such a thankless job coloring sometimes, because if you're doing a fantastic job, it blends in
No one
seamlessly
notices.
and no one
Right.
notices it.
Exactly.
But like the
They
second
only
you do
notice when
something
you're
that
doing
sucks,
badly.
yeah,
Yep.
that's right. That's right. It's it really is. It's like, you know, field goal kicking, right? Like if you're doing
Yep.
it right and you're making it, that's what you're supposed to do. But
Yeah.
on this book, regardless of whether it was issue 1 or issue 2, whatever, the coloring, man, it sets the mood so well for this book. And I apologize to Brian that his art wasn't the first thing I really noticed, but the part of the art that I noticed was the colors, and then you get to delve into what a genius Brian is. But yeah, man, I'll sing those praises endlessly. I love your color work on this book.
Thank you so much. Yeah, like working with Brian, he left me a lot of space to be able to work with the different planes and stuff like that. And because the environment was like a sort of neon, Hong Kong, like I used a lot of that neon lighting to be able to create a lot of those planes of lighting. There's one particular panel, I can't remember the character's name, but I think it's like on page 5 or 6 of issue 2, and it's just a small panel, but I remember like working on it. It's the one with the sports car, and she's got her purple outfit, and she's standing in front of the sports car, and I'm looking at it in black and white, and I'm like, damn, man, how am I gonna approach this? And then all of a sudden, it's just like I started thinking of the signage around her, using the neon lights, having the neon lights bounce off of this white car and stuff like
Right.
that. And then then I started like building up from there. So I think that was like the first panel that I was like, man, it's all like kind of clicking now, just like using these lights and this environment and stuff like that to create the planes and separate the planes, create values and stuff like that. So, and again, like Brian was a tremendous help with that, because with issue 1, he was handing me like tons of reference for which oh my God, I love that, because sometimes there are artists that they are, drawing from reference,
Mhm.
but then I don't know what the hell they're drawing from, So it's like, I remember like there was like one case literally, oh my God, I'll never forget this, bro. I was working on a book for one of the big two, and I'm looking at the page. I'm like, man, I know this cat got this from something. So I started like Google referencing stuff from the line art. I found the exact image that he referenced. And bro, it was like from a neighborhood that I grew up in. That's why I recognized it.
Oh,
Oh,
that's so cool.
Yeah. So it was like sick. And I was like, man, I wish he had handed me this reference. I wish he had said. So that was like one of those instances where, because you're going in between someone, you can't get direct communication. You can't get direct reference and stuff like. And that really actually added to the time that it needed to take me to finish the page, because I'm
for
like,
sure.
I didn't want to go in blind. I wanted some reference because it was like very specific. This billboards and bricks and stuff like that. I'm like, man, this looks so familiar. And
Yeah.
sure enough, I was like, wow, it was trippy. So yeah, man, that was the
I, I
big difference working with
I
Brian. That's the big
understand
one.
why it's a challenge, like in modern comics, like especially like corporate modern comics, why there's constantly this middleman between talent sometimes.
Hmm.
Even pencilers and inkers, right? Like
Mhm.
that happens too.
Right.
But gosh, like you can see when you kind of remove the middleman from the process and you allow the creatives to talk. I mean, generally there's three sets of hands that go into every comic book page in that sense when it comes down to the art, and it's crazy to think that there's a middleman between all three of those creatives. You remove that barrier, and you can see the snap and the crackle, and then like the kind of the magic that pops on a page when that happens.
Absolutely. I think that's why a lot of the image books do so,
Mm.
like, as far as like the value and what they put in them, they do so well because I think there are teams these are cats that are like wanting to work with each other. They clicked with one another, so now they want to put their own thing out. So I liken that very much to what 24/7 is doing. It's a bunch of cats that are getting together. We want to put something, singularly unique out. And how are we going to do that? This is how we're doing it. It's a smaller company. We're going to communicate with one another. It's really what I've grown accustomed to. When you think about it, before like all the tech and the email and all that stuff, when it came to DC and Marvel, both companies were in New York, and for the most part, cats had to go into the offices and hand
Right.
stuff in. And
Mhm.
that's when editorial would see it and probably have communication with them, probably have lunch with these guys and stuff like that. And there'll still be instances of that, of course, but because of email, because everything could be more fast tracked, there's a sort of dynamic that's missing, I think.
Yeah. I've been having that issue with the daCAT comic where everyone's all over the world and it's just all by telegram and email and then just saving Microsoft Word files for the story. And yeah, it's wild. I love it when stuff like that happens though, where you were talking about like, oh, you recognize like the skyline or you recognize like the area.
Yeah.
Anytime that happens, I don't know what that's called, but I see it on like TikTok a lot. Recently, there was it's like Sonic 3 came out, and there was an ad on TikTok of these like girls like just talking about Sonic 3, and they weren't like models; they were just like these random girls, and it happened to be picked up by like AMC or Paramount or whatever. And everyone in the comments was not talking about Sonic 3. They were talking about, oh, this is at Nassau Mall. This is in Levittown, New York. And I was like, oh my god, it is, and because that's where I was from. I was like, and I feel like sometimes that might take away from what you're trying to do because then people are focused on just, oh, I know this location. And
Right. Yeah, it's nuts because I came up in New York, so a lot of the books would reference New York skylines and stuff like that. So I could recognize quite a bit of it. So, but it just
what part of New York?
Oh, I grew up in the Bronx. Yeah,
Cool.
boogie down, baby.
I was a little farther east. I was in Long Island.
Oh yeah, were you what, Levittown?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, get out. Yeah, my sister moved there like not too long ago, maybe like 10, 15 years ago.
It's pretty sweet. There's not a ton to do there, but it's nice. It's chill.
Yeah.
And it's again hour train ride to the city. That was pretty.
Yeah, exactly. You got the LIRR,
Yeah.
head into the city anytime. Yeah, yeah, it's dope.
I
Seriously.
don't know if you've ever seen Captain America: Civil War, but there was a clip of where Captain America is talking to Spider-Man. It's like, "Where you from, kid?" He's like, "Queens," and he's like, "Ah, Brooklyn." And then everyone in the comments like, "This is so like New York, guys just flexing on where they're from." I was
Yeah,
like, "Yeah,
which is hilarious. But then that's funny because then I'm thinking, oh man, wasn't Cap originally from Lower East Side? And I'm thinking, yeah, in the comics, I think he was from the Lower East Side and stuff like that,
back in
like
the
around
day."
Alphabet City and stuff.
I think he
Which
eventually got a
doesn't even
studio in Brooklyn, if I'm not mistaken.
right in the comics.
Later
Yes,
on.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. But like
Yeah.
his birthplace, I think, was the Lower East Side.
It's good to know. I love that
Yeah,
trivia. It's like where Storm was original. Everyone's like, "Oh, she's like from Egypt." Like, no, 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 no. She was born in New York, but her parents brought her to Egypt, and I was like, ah. And everyone's just like, "No, bro, she's Egyptian." And I was like, "All right, no, whatever."
Yeah.
Is that a thing? I didn't know that. I always thought she was Egyptian too.
She
Yeah,
grew
but
up. She
her
grew up
parents
in
were worried
Egypt.
about like racial
Grew up in
tensions.
Egypt. Got it.
I guess when she
Interesting.
was created, like the racial tensions in New York or just wherever weren't like great, or the writer just used that. It's like,
Right.
oh yeah, make her born here. And
Interesting.
shout out to Ben Rose, co-CEO
Yo,
of VeVe, and
Ben, what's up, Ben?
shout out to
yo,
him. We love him. He's our
I love
bae. He's
I love Ben.
he'll be on the podcast next week on Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that'll be fun. We'll likely be talking about a lot of the comic stuff as well. So
We're here.
you guys are, I won't say grandfathered in. You guys got into VeVe like as a VeVe drop. Like it wasn't from like the new VeVe Comics website that they have, and it's not from the curator program. They haven't rolled out that. They'll roll that out in the next several months. What do you guys think about people doing that? Like when they have an idea, and it might cost them, $5-8 grand in order to make the comic because they have to pay people, the artists and stuff.
Sure.
And then what does it mean to get onto VeVe for you guys? Is that something where I was like, well, it's another digital platform. It happens to be the best one. That's why we're on there. Or a little more excited, like, bro, we're like shoulder to shoulder with Marvel and Disney and DC. It's like great. I just level of excitement for where you guys are at.
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, I'll let the fellow speak from an artistic side, but as a business, we are a publisher, and for me, I've always been, platform agnostic, meaning I embrace digital in every way as much as I embrace physical. And to me, VeVe is another channel, and not only as a channel, they're partners in how I see digital collectibles working, and us being pretty much the first independent publisher outside of Marvel that has been presented on the platform. To me, like, just shows the level of belief that David and Ben believes in what we're doing. And so I know David actually through a lot of the art collecting scene too, and his kind of understand what we're doing is really aligned with kind of how he sees the future for publishers as well. But I feel like one thing we have that, actually one thing we don't have that a lot of publishers do have is the baggage of understanding how the industry traditionally works. And I'm learning a lot about that. And I understand why it works that way. And I think there's a lot of upside to that. But at the same time, I also don't mind putting the time and effort into building alongside David and Ben to help get VeVe out to our audience as well, and at the same time service the audience that sees VeVe as their destination. Because even like Sanjay, we saw him earlier, he's on the chat. one of the things he shared with me, it's even though he may have started digitally, like there's a true love for physicals now as a collector because through VeVe, it introduced him more into the physical world. So I feel like there's a synergy that's going to happen. And for physical to continue surviving, we need to really expand the digital footprint of collectibles so that there is a mutual discovery that goes both ways. So I think, yeah, VeVe is definitely leading the way, in the business of digital collectibles. And I feel like there's like different renditions of what it's going to be, and the latest rendition is the VeVe comics, and I'm all for it, because I do understand that there's this context of like limited collectibles through the collectible drops, but we also want to make it accessible for everyone. And so I think with VeVe comics now it'll be accessible for everyone and for more people than just the the limited drops that are happening on the collectible side. So yeah, I'm all for it, man.
Agreed. What about you guys? What do y'all think?
Well, I think I agree with Carl in the sense that for the digital side, it'll definitely appeal to a younger audience, and I see that there's the possibility for something like introducing books on a platform such as VeVe, and then later on publishing volumes of the books for like boomers like me that still actually like to hold like physical copies. Because I'm a guy that still like buys like the IDW like artist edition books because I love those. I just love them, man. I just love like holding on to them and like flipping through the pages and stuff. So I think there could be a very happy marriage of both, where the younger audience can go for the digital aspect of it, and then maybe if it appeals to them, they'll pick up a physical copy later on, or maybe there's an audience for the physical copy later on as well. But but for the right format, I think all in all, I don't know. There's something I know the monthly thing is what it is, but I love like the European model of putting books out as well, like these high quality books, and like I feel like that's sort of what we're approaching. We're very close to approaching like this high standard, high quality paper and print and stuff like that.
Like
Just
the European albums.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So that's an appeal for me. So I don't know very much about like the digital part of it. That's like out of my wheelhouse, but I could see its appeal for a younger audience for sure. Because isn't it like huge in terms of like manga as well, like the digital like the readers and stuff for manga books and I'm like, that's it's there. It's all just there. And now we just have to find a way to happily join them, to get them out to more people.
hmm hmm I think both you guys said it more eloquently than I could. Like my familiarity with Weavy and like digital collectibles in general, it's not quite there. Like my arena of collecting right now is related exclusively to original art. Like even with comics, like I said, I read them digitally now, so that collectability was never like a thing with me for comics. I've still got comics from when I first started reading in like the early '90s and stuff, just beating the crap. They're
Yeah, we
worth,
read
Right.
everything.
they're worthless, right?
Yeah.
So that was never a thing for me. But as I said before, just anything. It doesn't have to be for me. Everything that comes out does not have to be for me. I think sometimes like there's a section of fandom that's screaming at clouds, like why is something digital or why it doesn't have to be. There's still physical books around. There's still stuff that's tailored for you. You don't need everything that comes out doesn't need to be catered to you. We can appeal to different sections of the public, and when it comes to creatives, anything that gets your work out to a broader audience you should be welcoming it. You should be open arms, like giving that thing a bear hug. Like anything that gets your work out to a broader audience. So Yeah, really, that's really my opinion on it. I don't care if someone made like a papyrus edition, or if we were chiseling this, on walls. Don't care. Just as long as it's out there and we keep this medium alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed. The ability to read. I haven't read them in AR. They've just been on the Comics Reader app. They're available now in the VeVeverse. Have you guys checked out the VeVeverse, or have you guys seen any of those videos that are online?
I'll be honest, I have not.
Not yet, me either. Even though I'm really into that kind of stuff, I just been so busy. Like it just, guys, I didn't realize how much workload a publisher, takes on. But I'm not complaining. I'm having a lot of fun. The hours pass by like nothing. It's great.
That is that's a double-edged sword. Like, had a lot of work today. Oh, it's over pretty quickly. Now I get to go home. But then do that X amount of times. Like, oh wow, this year went by really quick. So yeah, that's a lot. How do you guys feel about the rise of AI and that aiding certain people to go on and kind of take the originality out of it? It's like there's some people that like inconsistencies in their like art or in let's say like Dashi over there. Like you can tell where the artist like actually made that and it didn't come from a factory, because there's little, not mistakes, but there's little inconsistencies here and there. And I think that's what makes art really cool. And with the AI, everything's a little too perfect. Just my opinion. But how do you guys feel about that? Do you think that can correct some mistakes for people that maybe they're decent, they're okay artists, but they aren't up to the quality that you guys are, and this can help them get there? Or do you think that, like, listen, this is not good because it's gonna put a lot of people out of jobs?
I will scream at clouds when it comes to this. I have no
nice
issue.
Simpsons reference.
I have no issue with it. Yeah, I just, and it's not even just a matter of taking shortcuts if you don't have the talent or working on your craft. I don't even think that's what it comes down to. I just think the format that the current platforms use for AI, where it will be different if you've described something and it's using other people's hard-earned 10,000 hours poured into a thing, like multiple people who've worked on their craft. It's using their work fed into an engine, because none of that would work if there weren't pre-existing people that had done this by hand, whether that's digitally by hand or with a pen and paper, to feed this. So really, if it wasn't for that aspect of it, that's the one that I have an issue with. Is you're training these models on the hard work of people who've put in the hours at their craft and their profession to get to where they are, and then feeding into something that you've made an easy button for people who don't necessarily have the skills or the wherewithal to work on it. To me, it's theft. At a certain point, it's theft, and the people who aren't concerned with AI usually aren't concerned till it comes down to the exact spot that they live in, right? So as an artist, you can't, like, you're like, oh, all right, so what if someone uses ChatGPT to write a script? It's not affecting me until they're using AI to generate art. For a writer, it's like, hey, this is not going to affect me if I can write something and then use AI to make a comic with, until someone else uses AI to write a comic book with, right? Yeah. So it's a complex issue, but in the simplest form that I boil it down to is this is the underbelly of AI is where you're using other people's work to feed into it without any kind of release, authorization, or whatever. That's the part of it I have like a singular issue with.
Right. Yeah, or compensation, really, right? Yeah,
or compensation. Right. Yeah.
I mean, it's like, but it's a fact of our everyday lives. You know, our information is sold every day. We never benefit from that stuff in any
Mhm.
sort
Yeah.
of way. So it's like it's almost the same thing. I think what AI is sort of doing, it's almost becoming the driving force to original art now. You know, I think it's what's driving people to start going more toward collecting original art, buying original art, creating original art by hand. You know, just to
Yeah.
show people your chops. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
yeah.
I think there's a reason Barnes and Noble is opening 60 stores this year. I mean, it's
Mm.
crazy. You look at the
Wait,
trajectory of
they're
Barnes.
opening?
They're opening 60 stores this year. So
Wow.
you look at the trajectory, they actually went down like this, and then in the last 2 years, it's been like this. It's like a
Mm.
rocket ship,
I
and it's
wonder why.
because yeah, a
I think
lot.
it's an
Well,
AI rebellion.
yeah, it's a
Honestly.
rebellion because kids are rebellious. Like when we were growing up, we were rebellious, right? We did everything opposite of what mainstream was to us. So basically, what they're saying right now is happening is kids are starting to put down their phones. They're putting down TikTok, putting down these things to embrace physical reading again. And then because of that, they're going to bookstores. You can't replace this idea of physical discovery where like if I was a kid, I guess if I was to put myself in like to like a childlike mentality, which I am kind of childlike, is yeah, like if I'm used to over the pandemic and over the years being stuck at home and my parents only can allow me to escape through my phone, then one day they offer me a trip to Barnes and Noble and I could run upstairs and be in the game section and be away from my parents and discover what's there. I would love that better too. It's kind of interesting, right? Like we take it for granted, but there's a reason for that. And I do feel like technology evolves in phases, but impact happens collectively. And what I mean by that is there's going to be phases of technology that make sense to some but don't make sense to others. So I'll put like two phases that came together. One is like the blockchain. Like why the heck do we care about transparency and care about allocation of resources based that's tokenized? Well, because in a way, like if Iranga's art has token attached to it, he'll always be credited. But then what happened is the kind of there's always gonna be the evil doers of this world. That's why life is so interesting. Of course, they see that they're like, oh wow, like no one can attach me to this, and I could just use this as a marketing pitch to make some money make some quick money. Of course, they're gonna do that, right? Then of course the whole like world of like blockchain, is getting killed and getting re-questioned and getting kind of restructured, right? But then on the other side, there's AI, and AI can now scour the internet and pull references and allow you to bring it all into one place. That's really powerful. But then imagine the impact it could be if these two worlds came together, where an AI can pull together 100 piece of references and monetize on the result. But
Yeah.
let's say one of those references came from Aranga, one came from Will. All of a sudden, out of $100, they each get $1 in their pocket without having to do anything by just having, the tokenization of their creative works. All of a sudden, something hits and Ranga gets to buy a new house and Will gets to take a vacation and a year off, That's beautiful, right? I think if those technologies can come together and that world does happen to us, then yeah, I think it'd be really enticing to be a creative, right? Because all of a sudden you're always credited for your work and there's no way anyone can steal from you. And so yeah, I do feel like we're probably a few phases away from that because someone needs to figure out how the UI can work for something like this, and also there gonna be have to be a few generations of like gatekeepers to die off to allow this to happen. Because chances are like I came from music industry for 15 years. There are some like hardcore like guards that monetizes on everyone's stuff and they own everyone's stuff and they're
Yeah.
going to be the ones that's fighting against this, right? But
Right.
if the best case scenario happens where everyone does get paid for their creative contributions, yeah, I think then would make a lot of sense as to why this technology can work for the betterment of the future.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Agreed.
that's my thinking.
So something I wanted to talk about was burnout, Eric, and I didn't recognize it when I was younger. I was watching a documentary about Chris Benoit. It's called like Hard Knocks, Chris Benoit story, and one of the lines in there was Chris Benoit started to hate wrestling because of what WCW was doing to him. It was like, how do you like hate wrestling? Like, one, you're making money, you're this big star, and then in 2019, 2020, where I had this Pokemon business where I'd buy undervalued cards, and then after X amount of months, flip them. And it got to the point where it kind of took the fun out of collecting Pokemon cards because it was all about the money. And one of the things that I did to kind of correct that was just go back to binder sets, where I would say like, I'll just collect these cards in this set, but I won't care what condition they're in. I'll just put them in a binder like we did when we were kids, and that helped. But for artists like you guys are obviously you love it, you're really good at it, and obviously now you're drawing, and you probably have carpal tunnel, you're probably like tennis elbow, whatever it is, because you're drawing probably 60 hours a week. Is it still fun, or is it just like, oh, bro, I hate drawing now? And does it take? How do you get back to loving it after doing it for so long?
It's contingent on the project, I think. It really is. I mean, like, I've been at this game for a minute, and
Yeah.
I've gone through a couple of burnouts, in the years that I've done this. And it's like you gotta just figure out what you originally loved about it to begin with and try to rekindle that passion, not to sound cliched or anything, but yeah, man, that's really what it boils down to. Is it can really come down to the type of project that you're working on and whether you can be excited about it or not. Again, it's it, you bring up an interesting point because, like, coming up as a fan, you really want to get into the business, getting it into the business, and then once you pull back the curtain and you see all the gears that are involved in making the industry work, it's like, whoa, okay, you either adapt or die, basically, or you don't go into it. You got to be prepared. It's a fast paced industry too. It really is. It's like that monthly schedule. It's fast. I've had instances where cats want me to finish like a 20-page book in like 2 weeks and stuff like that, and that's the
Damn.
point where you start feeling burnt out.
Yeah.
Because you're a machine. You become a machine, and then as a colorist, we never saw the same type of royalties that an inker or penciler would. We never saw like, I mean, inkers and pencilers, because they actually hand did the pages, they get to split the book, and then they could go on to the convention circuit and then sell their pages if they wanted to. I can't as a
No.
colorist, you know. I don't get that sort of privilege. So, so the only way I could sort of keep up financially is by working more. And that's when you start to get burnt out, because you start to take in more than you can actually like physically handle in a day. So either you burn yourself out or you start screwing the pooch on your work, you know? And then once you screw the pooch on your work, there aren't going to be money, when you only deal with like two companies. You're not going to find many jobs if you
No.
if you if you F up, you know? So that's what it really boils down to. It's a race. It's a race.
Well, for me, like Will's been a pro for ages, man. I'm not gonna. I mean, I honestly didn't even know you'd work for CrossGen. That's crazy.
Yeah, bro.
That's
Yeah.
Mark Alessi, right? Is that
Yeah, Mark
yeah?
Alessi. That's right.
Yeah. I've been doing this for about 5 years, right? So like a peek behind the curtain, I have a day job. I've had a day job for the longest time, quote unquote 9 to 5. I'm fortunate in that I get to work from home at my job. So I also have a level of like kind of the safety net under me. Having said that, I I draw in the mornings. Like I'll wake up at around 6:30, and before I start the other work, I'll draw, right? And then when I'm done with work, let's say 5:30, I have dinner with my wife. We sit down. We have a draw. I have a drawing table downstairs, at where my TV is, and I draw there. So literally, like between 6:30 a.m., like starting at that point, I draw every day. Like I have enough work to keep me busy drawing every day, and I don't go to bed till like midnight, 12:30. I'm fortunate, even at my age, that I can usually survive on like 5 hours of sleep and
Yeah.
then maybe a 30-minute nap in the middle of the day. That's my lunch break. But having said that, like I've been doing that for the better part of like 5 years now. I can see where something needs to change in that equation and what I'm doing. Because it as long as I'm not entirely reliant on comic art right now to to do the daily things, to the expenses, the mortgage and whatever.
Yeah.
But if it became my sole source of doing, I can see it very quickly. There's a level of anxiety to it, where where's the next job coming from, et cetera, et cetera. And
Yeah.
it's something I think about a lot, even when I think about like maybe phasing out and doing this full time, where I don't want to replace, because I love doing this. I love drawing, and I draw every day, and I don't ever want to get to the point where I have to constantly figure out how to monetize that part of it that I love. Will I lose? Am I willing to sacrifice losing the love of it and making it transactional to a certain degree? I don't know. I don't know. Some of that you can't control. Some of that you can. But yeah, I think it's a very real thing. I think it's a very real thing.
Yeah, it absolutely is. It
What
absolutely.
about
I
you,
mean,
Carl? How do you keep from splitting in two? I don't know if you can hear me. It's a little.
It's interesting. I've had a
Okay.
few careers. I've okay. I'm going through a weird area. Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yep.
it's a little choppy, but you're good.
Randy, we're only talking to Carl's Audi right now. His innie does other stuff.
So, yeah, can you guys hear me now?
Yep.
Yep.
I'm going through a weird area by the airport. All right, cool. Burnout. No, it's cool. It's cool hearing from Will. It's really cool hearing from Ranga. I personally had experienced two burnouts in my life, and it was when what I thought I loved became too much of a work, and the pressures around it. And both times I took a year off, and I feel like those were like the biggest blessings of my life, because as much as I burned out, it was almost kind of like I lucked out at the same time, and thus found out that I wasn't really in love with what I was doing. And I feel like now I'm kind of in a place where I've also valued, like in 2020, I almost died from COVID, and that was like a huge wake up call that our true currency is our time, not the money. And at the end of the day, like I've had my bank account at different levels, all through life. That never really made me happy. And when I talk to mentors who've done extremely well for themselves, or even like older friends that had kind of run the rat race, more money in the bank did not like fulfill them. And like, even to be honest, frankly, like we don't have kids, and I have friends that have kids that are way older than me. They always tell me like, you're not missing much because the kids don't come home anymore anyways. And the truth is, when I'm on my deathbed, chances are they might not really be around, you know? And so it's really interesting just hearing about all the traditions and happiness that is programmed into us that we often chase. Like, ultimately, it winds down to how you spend your time, right? And so I did make that promise to myself that, every minute I'm gonna value, because it could be that last minute that we spend. So I think for me, like, I've kind of set my life in a way that burnout just won't exist. I hope, knock on wood, but I feel like I've had two major burnouts in my life where on the outside, everyone thought, wow, like Carl has a 6 times platinum single, like just stuff like that, like just crazy stuff that you think are just the most satisfying things on earth, but it wasn't. Like it actually was the most depressing times of my life. And so like what I enjoy now, like dude, like I love like hanging with you guys on stream and talking about this stuff. You know, I love like working with Justin Jordan and ideating on other stories we could tell, and you know, every time Will sends colors to our email thread, I'm like, oh, like everyone's like, you know, it becomes like a whole like chat thread because everyone's reacting to his stuff. And when Aranga, who's like a homie, like from just our collecting, like seeing what he's doing and like progressing in his career and in art, like I'm constantly thinking about how I could help as well, like thinking about like what he's coming from and like how he's transitioning. Like I'm always thinking about stuff like that. Like how can I like get my friends into a situation that they feel like they're working their dream job and loving as well. So that's kind of like what I work for. So yes, I definitely get like the burnout because yeah, I crashed hard 2 times, and you know I never want to get there again. But you know, hopefully I can maintain that now with those lessons learned. But yeah, that's kind of my response to burnouts.
Can I ask a quick follow up to that, Carl? Like,
Sure.
what does if it's not getting too personal, what does burnout look like for Carl Choi? Like, give me like one of the 2 burnouts. Like, what does it look like? Is it you don't want to keep you just don't want to do it anymore? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think let's say I would say like the first one. There was 2 instances. The first one was commercially. So I think for some context, I was a freaking kid coming out of college, and I got into the nightlife business, and that parlayed into the music business. And you know, fast forward, by the time I was 25, I was freaking driving a Hummer, running 500 nightclub things every week, and we had a 6 times platinum single. And like to the world, that was like top of my career. But what attracted me to all that, honestly, was community. Like, I love nightclubs because I love building communities. I got to travel all the world, build gatherings, and then often I always say, like, I've been in 14 weddings, 4 of them as best man, and a lot of it is because I got very close to the people. I cared about the people that came to our clubs because I was like their therapist. A lot of times they're drinking. I don't drink much, and I would listen to everyone's problems and like try to give feedback as much as I could. And then on the music side, I met some of these musicians through the nightclubs that we were touring a lot of, like, name them, like Bruno Mars, Snoop Dogg. We toured them through our nightclubs because we had like nightclubs running in like 14 cities. So I started touring indie artists through our nightclubs, and I truly did care about them, and like I became their managers. And through our nightclubs, we were able to parlay that into record deals with them. And what happened was a couple of things. It became commercially very successful, and then the nightclub stuff. One was, I remember a moment. I walked into our office, and I was really tired, and I went up the elevator. I walked through the office, and I remember getting into our door on the way to my office, and like I was away for tour, came back, and there was like all these new faces I didn't recognize, and like usually I like saying hi to everybody, and I didn't know like 90% of the people that was working for me. And I got to the office, and I remember having this crazy anxiety. I closed the door behind me, and I sat there, and I was like having a anxiety attack. And then like a year later, when all the like platinum single stuff happened, like I poured my heart. Every dollar I made, I poured into like the musicians that I believed in. And what happened was when we did this deal with Interscope, it in a way it kind of teared our friendships apart because just the way the music industry was designed was to kind of tear apart the infrastructure you built so they could control the pieces that came with it. And for me, like I didn't care about like all the fame and whatever that was coming with it. I care more about the relationship with my artists because they were like my boys, they were like my brothers, and so to see those relationships kind of like get affected, that was what really impacted me. And literally, like Ranga, I mean, I literally woke up one day and like called an emergency meeting to like a staff of like 60 people and said today's my last day, and I basically just quit and like signed everything over to my partners and like started fresh. And it was like in hindsight, it was crazy. Like I was literally crazy because I think psychologically, and even just like I was in a good place, right? But dude, like that year was like I would never replace that. Like the freedom I felt, the peace I felt, and like how I was able to recover from all that. Like, man, like I can never replace that experience. And so yeah, that's kind of, you know, in short what a burnout looks like, and kind of what happened.
That's
Damn.
crazy, man. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah. Deep.
Yeah, I
No,
did.
thanks for asking. I mean, I don't really visit those stories much, but it kind of, even as I'm talking through it, kind of reminded me, man, like kind of boys to men, you know. It's like you very mature, you know, in hindsight, and very disruptive to probably a lot of people's lives, and wasn't very responsible and kind of selfish, to be honest. But you know, it was probably one of the most freeing things for me personally in my professional journey.
But it looks like you were taking care of your mental health, even if you didn't necessarily know it. Like, even though there wasn't a label of
Yeah,
mental
well,
health. Yeah.
I mean, that's what makes it a burnout, honestly. You know, you're not
I
in your
think
right
back then.
mind. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, back then I didn't know about therapy and all that kind of stuff, you know. And I think as you know, as like being Asian, you know, I'm a 1.5 generation, so I was born in Hong Kong, moved here. My parents,
Mhm.
you know, they're just worried about working, trying to pay the bills. And so for
Yeah.
me, like, you know, mental health was never like a topic. And in fact, in Asian communities, it's kind of shameful to talk about that kind of stuff.
It's
So
taboo,
yeah, for me,
right?
it was like definitely
Yeah.
crash and burn to the
Thanks for
Yeah.
Latin.
But
Believe
I come
me.
from a different part of Asia, but it's the same thing, man. It's I don't know what it is about brown people. We don't like talking about.
Yeah. We're
We
supposed to
don't like
suck it
talking
up.
about it. Yeah, just freaking pull your boots up, get out of bed, and go to work.
Yeah,
That just seems to be the thing.
I've found the
yeah, damn.
definitely
Randy,
not the
I don't know how you
healthiest.
did it, but we're here to talk about
How
we're
did
talking about
we get
zero
here?
dose number two. All of a
Dude,
sudden, we're just in
we're
this
giving
thing.
folks insight into the minds behind 24/7, you know? Come on, you know?
Oh man,
Dude, have you guys seen that TikTok
Randy's like
trend?
Oprah over here.
No, no. I don't. I mean, this is good to talk about. Obviously, I don't want to make anyone like relive past trauma or anything, but there's a TikTok trend where these girls like get together for like a sleepover, and they bring like pieces of candy or alcohol, and they put it into like a hat or a bowl, and they share it all, and they talk about like their trauma, and it is like the most unhinged stories like I've
Wow.
ever heard, where they're just like, yeah, you know, my mom kept like bullying me and saying that my hair looked like shit. So I wrapped it in like olive oil. And then when I went to go to the fridge in the garage, the olive oil was leaking, and I tripped on the stairs and I broke like 3 ribs and I had to get stitches. And but that was after the fact. During the fact, I came to consciousness like 6 hours later. It was like 3 in the morning, and then I tripped the indoor alarm, and my dad almost attacked me with a bat. And I was like, oh my god. So like this whole trend is about girls just going through like the most insane night of their lives, and I was like, damn. I love it. I eat that shit up.
I like it. I think it's very good for a generation that learn to be vulnerable. Because, yeah, Ranga, well, I don't know how you guys grew up, but like, it is really hard to be vulnerable growing up.
No,
It's like,
yeah,
you know,
Yeah, no, we're not
Yeah.
supposed to
gotta be
be.
hard. You know, you gotta be hard.
100%.
Yeah.
Look, I got. There's a lot of things, you know. Like I think millennials and the, you know, we keep hearing the same tired cliches about them and whatever. And the truth is, like, it's not a monolith. Like you can't just tag an entire generation because of the way you see a couple of people do
Yeah.
it. But the one thing I do really love about them is they kind of give a shit about their mental health.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know, I really kind of respect that, and I think that's something that goes, you know, we it sounds, just listening to these conversations, it obviously sounds like we grew, like the generation slash culturally we grew up in a thing where, you know, you gotta be, come on, like you gotta,
Yeah.
especially as men, like we were told,
Yes.
like you gotta raise a family, you gotta feed your family, you gotta da 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 da. and there's got to be like some kind of balance to that. And I think, well, I hope if you can marry the ability to be kind of strong and have a work ethic, but also give a shit about your mental health, that's all good stuff. And I think like that millennial attitude kind of changed some corporate behavior as well in the workplace for how you treat your employees and things like that. So there's some good stuff there. There's some good stuff. They get a bad rap. Like any kind of analogy to lazy or whatever, it seems like we tag it with millennial. And the truth is, like, millennials are like 40 now. So it's not who you think is a millennial. That's
Right.
not. Yeah. You know? So now it's what, Gen Z? Is that it? Is that what we're up to now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gen Z is crazy.
Yeah. But, you know, they'll grow out of it. It's just this weird thing. Like, I'll tell you what, I'll forgive everything if they start reading physical comics again. They're allowed to do whatever the hell they want. If they go back to Barnes and Noble and start buying graphic novels and like floppies, they can do whatever the hell they want. They can wear whatever shoes they want. They can listen to whatever music. I don't care. I'm singularly focused on growing comics.
Right
So
on.
I've seen like Gen Z, and again, I love them for this reason, but also a little scary. One, they're like, because their parents have like raised them on like cell phones. The cell phone was always in their face, recording them, and you know, ever since they were like little, their parents would like post them on like Facebook and Instagram, etc. And obviously, there's ways to like track your kids now. Like you can track their phone. They have these apps for it. So a lot of kids will, like you guys were saying before, they'll put the phone down and they'll leave the phone at home and they'll go out and ride bikes. And most of it's pretty innocent. I guess sometimes when you get a little older, like teenagers, you get, you know, they're doing stuff they're probably not supposed to be doing. But there's stuff like on TikTok, it's like, here's how to make a Faraday cage so that your parents can't track you. Like, and they put their phone. I was like,
Wow.
Wow.
That's kind of cool.
That's really impressive.
Dude, when we were kids, we went to ride bikes and like took off for hours without any tracking, and our parents trusted us, and we always came home. You know, so there's something around.
And sometimes we did innocent kid stuff. Sometimes we did really dumb stuff.
Yeah.
But hey
man, comics are cool because I remember, like, it's funny. Like, I'll even talk about this. Like, now that I kind of got to know some of the industry folks and like, you know, Jib Shooters, Bob Lane, like of the world, like those guys, they were like around our age when they were like rocking out and like in comics and stuff and like putting out a lot of cool stuff. And there was a lot of like adulting content that went into comics, which is what made it interesting to me as a teenager because I got to see the world through the eyes of adults. Like, I mean, like one of the first books I remember was like, what was it? I think, was it Rye or Magnus in Valiant, where like I got to walk into a strip club because Magnus was hang out in the strip club and he got to go to the back room of a stripper and like it's like I was like, what? Like, I'm like this like 13-year-old and I'm seeing the adventures of Magnus in the future at like a cyberpunk strip bar.
This
and
is why
like,
you put that in Evermind.
Yeah, no, like, you know, that was so cool. We're like that, and then like I remember like Jim Lee, like forever. Like people always imagine him X-Men, Batman, whatever else. For me, it was like, dude, freaking Psylocke in the swimsuit special, man. That's my Jim Lee right there. That's what I remember. So it's pretty funny. Like there was like, it's kind of cool that like there was this escape where we were adulting and reading up a bit, you know, growing up, and I think that's what made that intimate for us, you know.
And it was a gateway drug for me to like reading, period. And I grew up, you know, I grew up where like English wasn't my native language, right? Until so like I learned English in schools, like but comic books, man, like from a cultural perspective as well. Growing up overseas, by the time I moved to the US, man, I felt like I lived here. And it wasn't even like movies or TV. It was like comics. It was learning, you know, like not just vocabulary, but colloquialisms and dumb stuff like that I got way before I was allowed to start watching certain movies and whatever. I was getting that from comics. So the ability of comics to bridge gaps. I mean, things like that, like cultural divides or whatever. By the time I moved here, it was like easy peasy, man. I was good to go. I had more of a struggle learning how to wash my own clothes than I did fitting in a new country culturally with people. And that was all through comics.
Shout out to Ace Rig Move that's in the middle of the South China Sea watching the stream using Starlink.
That's pretty cool. Freaking technology, dude.
That's pretty
awesome.
rad.
That's pretty rad. That's pretty rad.
That's pretty awesome. We're broadcasting everywhere. So there's a buddy of mine, my friend Lilith first came here for a visit in 2017 to visit me. She's from Austria, and she had a couple of things and this is the leading question for you, Oranga, is the biggest culture shock. For her, she said it was two things. Is that she was surprised at how many like American flags there were like everywhere. And she's like, yeah, we don't do this in Europe. I was like, okay, well, we're proud of our country. I'm sorry. And then the other one, she's like, you guys really have yellow school buses? I thought that was just for the movies. I was like, no, like that's how we get to school. So, Oranga, what was your biggest culture shock when you came to America?
Man, none of those really like I didn't have too many culture shocks. Biggest one. I got this. This is a simple answer. I know the answer to this. So I arrived it was 1998 August. I was 18 years old. School semester hadn't started. I came here to go to college. School semester hadn't started yet. The dorms weren't open, so I was staying at this place called the International House, where if you're an international student, you can bridge the gap between when the dorms open to when you arrive. Anyway, it's important to the story because I showed up at night. I got picked up by a volunteer at the airport. So I was staying at the International House, wake up the next day, I'm in a new country, I'm jet lagged, I'm hungry. There was a dude there that was visiting his brother, and so he lived there and had a car, and he said, hey, you want to go to McDonald's to get something to eat? And I was like, okay, McDonald's breakfast isn't a thing overseas. Okay? It's freaking Big Macs, quarter pounders, fries. That's what it is. So I was like, McDonald's, yes, let's go. We went to McDonald's. It's like, I don't know, 9 a.m., 10 whatever it is. It's the breakfast menu's on there. I get there, look at the stupid menu. I'm like 3 people deep in line right now, and I'm looking at the menu. I'm like, what the hell is a grit? What the hell is a hash brown? So I'm in the South. I'm in Alabama, so grits are a thing here. But this is day 1, and I'm like, the thing that I thought would be the biggest comfort food I could get, which was McDonald's, betrayed me. So I'm sitting there trying to figure out what a grit is, what a hash brown is, and even the terminology for stuff. A sausage is a sausage link where I grew up. It's like a hot dog. It's a sausage. Right. And then this thing is a freaking patty, right? So everything I ordered showed up on a plate, didn't look like anything I knew. I ordered a sausage and it was this stupid beef patty looking thing. I ordered grits and it was like this bowl of snot. I ordered hash browns. I didn't know what it was. And okay, hash browns, at least it was okay. It's like potatoes and whatnot. But yeah, number 1 culture shock, man. That was McDonald's breakfast.
That's funny.
Blew my mind.
I thought you were going to say it was going to be like portions or something. Like you weren't used to like the huge ass American portions that we serve.
Dude, I definitely wasn't used to it. And hey, that's the other thing, right? Like I went from this skinny kid, my body changed in a 3-month period. Yo, for real, my body changed when I was 18, in a 3-month period. And I it's not like we were constantly looking at ourselves in pictures and stuff. Digital cameras weren't even really a thing in 98, so you had to wait till the photo got developed and blah, blah, blah. So I didn't even get to see myself in pictures, until someone went and developed a camera roll. And I was like, what the hell happened to me? And I'm like, look at it. So yeah, portions were a thing, man. I had to really learn how to okay, I gotta watch what I'm eating here.
Yeah. I guess at that time.
Hey guys, I got hop, but Randy, you guys keep going. But I gotta get to. But man, this was freaking awesome. I'm gonna call you.
Love you, Carl. I'll have you on again.
Okay.
I'm gonna.
All right. So in 98, I googled this. I was like, what was big in 98? So you had the premiere of Britney Spears, and then you had Titanic come out. How many girls did you go to take to see Titanic? Because in my generation, that's the movie you put on when you want to Get busy.
Man, when Titanic came out in '98, when it came out, I was still in Dubai. I hadn't moved to the US yet. And I was dating a girl like in high school, so I definitely took exactly one girl to see Titanic.
What about you, Will? What were you doing in '98?
In '98, I was working. I was working with Valiant, actually, doing coloring. I was working at a studio called Atomic Paintbrush at the time, and that was when Valiant was taken over by Acclaim, and they got relaunched under the Acclaim banner. So that's what I was doing then, and man, had just moved in with my then girlfriend and stuff. And it was interesting. '98 was an interesting sort of transitional period because around '95 is when they started getting more into like the digital coloring thing. Because when I started interning at Valiant, they were still using the Doc Martin water colored paint sets and stuff.
And making like the color guides.
Yeah, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I was actually starting to learn that stuff. And then a buddy of mine said, "Yo, don't waste your time with that because they're gonna start doing everything with computers. Start learning the
Yeah.
computer stuff." So he start like, oh man, back in '95, I didn't even know how to turn a computer on. Then found out you just got to buy a dinner and a drink, and you're all set. Terrible joke, but anyway. But anyway, like I started learning like Photoshop. I started actually putting more emphasis on learning the digital stuff with Photoshop, and I kind of put the watercolor stuff aside. And it's only like now that I'm trying to get back into the actual physical watercolor and stuff that I was starting to learn in '98 because I was attending courses. I was like ready to like get into the comic business in '98. Interning at Valiant, started doing production at Valiant, then started doing coloring. And because I was like one of the first guys to start learning the Photoshop stuff and the digital coloring stuff, that's what got me in at Atomic Paintbrush. Because when Acclaim took over, they wanted the whole line of books to be done by the one studio. That was like a wild time, man. I've seen so much in the time that I've been doing this stuff. Because like I used to study like Aranga, you said it perfectly. Like the books that I have, they're not collectibles. They're for me to reference and stuff like that. I was checking out like Richard Eisenoff's stuff on Cyberforce. Brian Haberlin on Spawn, Liquid when they were doing the stuff for Extreme, and then
Yeah.
DC and stuff. So like I was actually kind of like studying like a lot of the colorists at the time because I was like fascinated by the whole digital revolution that was happening with digital coloring. So yeah, that was me in '98 to answer that, to long-windedly answer that question, Randy.
Will,
That's-
I'm sorry, Randy. Just I had a
Yeah,
follow
yeah.
up. Will, is that cool? It's on coloring.
Yeah,
Um,
of course.
So, to my memory, as far as I recall, Malibu Comics was one of the first like groundbreaking companies that was doing that had to exclusively digital coloring their books. Like they were doing Prime and a couple of others on their titles, and they were known for having these slick looking comics on there, and they were like on the forefront of the digital coloring revolution. And then Marvel specifically bought Malibu, that entire catalog, not for their comic book characters, but for their coloring department to like bring them in house for that. Do you kind of recall that time? Because I want to say it was like 96, around that area, 96, 97.
I do.
Because I know I was still overseas at the time.
I remember when they did acquire Malibu. I don't recall the reason why, but I will tell you this: that when I was at Cross Gen, Marvel did approach like the coloring people at Cross Gen to find out about hiring that coloring department at the time, essentially, because I
Gotcha.
think Cross Gen was kind of going under at the time, and it was going through its bankruptcy phase.
Yeah.
And like Disney, well, I don't know how many people know this, but Disney actually owns all the cross-gen property. And
They
so
own
for a
what?
long,
Oh, really?
they bought all that property before they acquired, the Marvel stuff. They
Which
bought with
property?
cross gen.
CrossGen.
Yeah.
Oh,
See, that's the thing. People don't know from cross gen. It's like if you actually saw these books that we were putting out 25 years ago or 20, whatever. Yeah, 25. Oh my God, damn,
Yeah.
25 years.
Dude, I was
We
reading
were,
Ruse and Meridian,
yeah,
and like Ruse would be an amazing like movie or TV show. There's some
right.
real great material there.
Yeah, Laura Martin was killing it on colors on Ruse. That's what I was talking about earlier. Like being in an environment with Laura Martin, Justin Ponzer was absolutely killing it on Scion with Jim Chung.
Yeah.
Like if people saw these books, we were putting out banging books compared
Beautiful.
to Marvel at the time
Yep.
in terms of quality and shit like
Hmm.
that. Like for real, and color quality and stuff. CrossGen was one of the first companies to actually credit colorists on the cover of the book. All
Oh,
the other two followed suit soon after that. They weren't putting colorists on the covers as far as credit.
yeah.
It was CrossGen that introduced that. With it was CrossGen that kind of introduced the previously on page and stuff like that. Marvel wasn't doing that, and now with every first page you have previously on to kind of
Right.
recap, and then you go and then you proceed to the story. They weren't doing that before CrossGen. So
huh.
like to Mark Alessi's credit, he kind of revolutionized a lot of stuff, and part of why he did it was he wanted creative people to have security. He wasn't paying, on a per page basis. He was giving everybody salaries. He
Right.
just asked that you produce a page a day, essentially, you know, and stay on schedule, whatever the case might be. So
Yeah.
he wanted to change the face of the industry, but unfortunately, I think at the time, like the tech industry kind of collapsed, and that's where
That's where he
everything kind
came
of fell
from, right?
apart.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's where
yeah,
his
right.
money
He
was
had
made.
sold his company to Ross Perot and stuff, and that's where
Ross
yeah. And then he
the
was. I'm sorry.
the Ross Perot is the one that wanted to be president years back, right?
That's right,
Yes.
right, right. But Ross Perot was a huge like industrial, capitalist and stuff like that. He was a tech guy, and he was buying tech companies in the '90s and stuff like that. So he did that with Alessi's company, and Mark Alessi was like a huge fan of comedy. He had like tremendous like artwork, original artwork on the walls of the office and stuff like that. Stuff from like Wally Wood and stuff. It was like, whoa. Like it was like the first time I'd ever experienced stuff like that. I'd seen that. Like I was like a 20 something year old kid, like, coming into this environment. I was like, damn, this is nuts.
And
So
his
I
whole thing
kind of
was
got
like you
spoiled
had to
by that.
move there and work out of the offices, right?
Yep, he had everybody move to from wherever they were. I think Jim had come from England. He had hired Andrea DeVito from Italy. He had brought Mike Perkins in from overseas. I had come from down from New York. Brandon Peters, like all across the country, all around the globe. He was like bringing talent in.
And
He
top-notch artists too.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolute like top notch artist. Josh
He's like-
Middleton, like he was like killing it
That's where
on
Middleton broke
Meridian.
through was
Hmm.
CrossGen, right?
Yep,
On like Meridian, I think, like when he
yep,
started off. Yeah.
yeah. He and
Yeah.
Dexter Vines were working on that at the time.
Yeah. And you had Butch Geis on Ruse, and you
Bruce.
had Mark Wade on writing duties, and you had Ron Mars in there. Like they
Yep.
had a stellar stable, man.
Hell yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. A huge talent pool in that studio, a huge talent pool, and we were going strong for like 3 years. We were really putting out some top quality stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Randy, we're just nerding out here.
Oh no, that's so freaking cool.
Little
I
trip
love that
down
stuff.
memory lane. I'm
Um,
I'm loving it because Aranga's like one of the few cats that actually, like I say, cross gen. He actually knew what the hell I was talking about.
Yeah,
yeah,
because you had the sigil thing that connected the universe together, and yeah,
Exactly, and there was always just one like primary character that had the sigil in the
yeah,
books and stuff like that. Yeah,
yeah.
man. And then like I think I can't remember when, maybe like 10 years ago, Marvel did put out like a few of the titles. I think they had put out Mystic, and I can't remember if they actually put the sigil book out or not. I don't remember which ones they put out, but they tried to like not reprint, but they were trying to put out new stories
Yeah, they should
with
really
those
have
characters.
leaned back into Ruse, man. That book was
It was our
phenomenal.
best book, man. It was
It was
like story
phenomenal.
wise and art wise, yeah. It was
Yeah,
like
basically
one of our
Sherlock
best.
Holmes is what
Yeah.
it was, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah.
Yeah, it
Anyway,
I
if
was.
you,
wonder if
I don't
there's
know,
a way.
maybe you're not familiar with it, Randy. I don't even know where you can find these books anymore because they're not necessarily in print.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
not.
But if
There
you get
might
a
be
chance,
some.
like if you find like a trade paperback or something on eBay or whatever, I highly recommend the books.
Yeah, especially Ruse.
Okay. I mean,
Definitely.
I just Googled them real quick, and I imagine that they could do somebody's got them. So I could find them somewhere. I see articles on Wikipedia, Fandom, Reddit. So like I can
Yeah,
one of those
Yeah.
places should have a place like, oh yeah, I'll just get them wherever, buy them. I don't know if they were ever uploaded anywhere to the internet.
someone
But
probably bootleg scanned them for sure.
I'll try to
Absolutely. Yeah.
find them.
For a while, people were like practically giving them away. We had like stacks and stacks and stacks of trades. We were putting
Yeah,
out stuff really consistently.
yeah. I
But
have the individual books for Ruse, and I also have some of the trades. So
Mm.
yeah,
Yes,
there's
there's a lot.
I think Marvel probably should or Disney, I guess, probably should do that in a way there. Reese Witherspoon does this with like books like for women. I don't know what they're called, but she bought like thousands of titles and then she made this book club. And a lot of women be like, oh, it's Reese Witherspoon's like book club. Sometimes she appears on video chat, sometimes does whatever. So she gets a lot of women to like join. And she releases a book like once a month for everyone to read and discuss. And the ones that do really well, she turns them into movies.
right. She's
And
in from a production
Man,
standpoint. Yeah,
that is smart. That
so
is
I feel like if
smart.
Disney were to do that with all the IP they have, they're like, hey, this club you can join is for free. We'll release a title every week or whatever. And the ones that do really well, they can bring them over into like the MCU or something. I
I
feel like
think
that's how.
you're onto it, man. I think that's a great idea.
I mean, Mystic could fit in with Doctor Strange
Yep,
somehow, you know.
Yeah.
yep,
Sigil with Guardians, you know.
So
yep.
We had every genre. We had
yeah.
every genre.
So maybe you guys can help me here. I'm owner of this IP called daCAT. There was I think one or two guys that were here. Eric Moz has his little cat over there. And they made a comic like last year, and it was okay. And they're like, hey, can you get it? It's a crypto, and they're like, can you get this like on VeVe? It's a comic. They do comics, and I read it. I was like, I if I probably could, but I want to give people something that would like make money. That's like a really good story, and I've been writing for a long time, and they said, well, if you write something, we just want to get exposure. Like if you write it, can you like get it on VeVe? I was like, okay. So I started writing, and I don't want to pat myself on the back, but it's pretty good. And I've gone through the struggles of like, okay, like obviously the art, even for like a page, you have to storyboard and pencil and draw it and color. Like it's a lot. So obviously, people demand what that's worth, and the work is worth, a couple to several $100s a page, depending on what you're doing, and depending on the quality of work. And it's like, okay, so now, maybe sell part of the IP in order to pay for it, and we'll. So the book is written, like the first like 6 or 7 pages are done. It's artists and stuff, but if you guys saw something that was the writing was great and the first few pages were great, because you guys experienced in the industry, how would you guys go about like funding it? Would it be like a Kickstarter? Would it be to sell the IP? Would it be to like just ideas? There is no wrong answer here.
I don't know. Will, like I said, I'm going to defer to Will because he's seen it all at
I
this
think
point.
I think before Kickstarter, in a scenario that like that, you would have promised something like equity in the book. So
Mhm.
like the person or people participating in the book probably would have taken a lower rate
Yeah.
As long as they could share, as long as there was profit sharing. So like if you knew that it was going to be a book that was going to be guaranteed be put out by Image, you know, for sure be published, and you know with someone so that and you're confident that it'll sell enough copies that you'd be able to get a return on it, then yeah, there's going to be instances where you sacrifice a little bit of money but you invest the time
Yeah.
for the return, you know. So that would have been the case maybe 15 years ago or 20 years ago, but nowadays I would say probably the smart bet would be Kickstarter, because any project that you have, you know, I honestly like, I think Kickstarter and crowdfunding is a real game changer in
Mm-hmm.
terms of the comic book industry, because now you have anyone that could put out anything that they're passionate about. You know, you don't know. It's very much like the way the indie guys would put stuff out in the 80s and late 70s and stuff. You know, it's a grassroots sort of effort, you know, and if people like what you're putting out on the Kickstarter, they're gonna fund it for
Yeah.
sure. You know, so if in terms of like payment for the folks participating in it, if there's equity in it for them, and and they have a belief in the project, then they would be willing to put the time into it in order to get the product out there for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
Good point.
I think so. And you said you had like what, 6 pages like written and drawn. I can tell you like one of the things that really moves the needle for me, because there are so many Kickstarters out right now. You only have a certain amount of bandwidth, right, to get people's attention. I'll use the example of Zero Ghost. The first time I laid eyes on it was an ash can at a convention. Carl handed me the Zero Ghost ash can, and but man, I was hooked. So I was like literally, I was waiting at that point. Then you had the option to sign up for the waitlist for the Kickstarter or whatever that's called, the landing page. You're waiting. You get notified when it goes live. And so I was hooked on that. And then I was like, okay, well, I gotta see what happens for the rest of the story. And then Carl asked me to do the cover for issue 2, which means I got to read all 3 of those issues. So that became a different thing. But it was that freaking ash can, man. As soon as I saw the ash can, I was like, and it was color, right, Will? The ash can was in color too, because
I wouldn't even consider it an ash can, because the traditional ash can would usually be like 5x7 and black and white. What Carl put out was like, man, it was like basically an issue. It was like it may have had the ash can label, but he put a full blown color book out there, you know.
Yeah, and it was a limited release,
Yeah.
and he promoted it at cons. I think I got it at Heroes, I want to say, if I'm not mistaken. But like he went to multiple. He went to SDCC, he went to Heroes. I think you guys joined him at one of the conventions. But he was humping it, man. I mean, he was there with his backpack and whatever. Like he had copies of the thing, and anybody that would listen, he would sign up, and then log in. The people that got the ash can, what he would ask is, hey, sign up do the sign up link on Kickstarter at the same time. So Carl's like thinking kind of ahead, 3D chess like with this thing.
Yeah.
But
sure.
if you believe in the product, like if you believe you've got a good story and
it's a great story.
Yeah,
it's really fun.
And art and stuff like that, man, I would say like make the investment in an ash can as well. And I think when you're at a convention, you don't need to give them away. Like you can, I've seen ash cans that had a set price that you could buy it for. I've seen ash cans where it's a pay what you can model as well. So some people might give you $5, some people might give you $10 for the ash can. I know, like whenever I see it and it's a book I want to support creators, like I'll usually pony up $10 for an ash can, just because like I know that they've siphoned their own money off to do this. That $10 isn't going to make a giant difference to me in what I buy at the convention, but it's nice for someone to get that for an ash can. So I would say, use one of those models. You don't have to give them away for free.
That's a good point.
Very smart. Very smart. Yeah.
There's so the first one. So in order, Eric said, how much would this need for something like this? Normally comic books are 20-ish to 30-ish pages, depending on storage, depending on where they are. This one happens to be 45 pages, so it's a little long. But I mean, it's the first one. I think most of them are going to be like that, and it looks not bad. I mean, I know you can't really read the words over there, but there's one of the pages, and I think it looks pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the name of the title?
daCAT Chronicles.
DACAT?
Yeah, DACAT, and then Chronicles. It's not out yet, obviously. Like, I just got like the IP. I just got the trademark. So what we're trying to do now is we raised a bit of money by getting people to say, like, hey, if you want to, and it's meme communities, like Chaos on the Chains is in it, Sharby's in it. So there's like a bunch of meme communities that are going to pay to be in it because we'll be on VeVe. VeVe has their OMI token, so a lot of crypto peeps are in there, and we'll put like a page. So the characters are in the story. So we've been pretty creative with it so far, but it'll sell out on VeVe because it's, despite the lack of, there's like 145 people here, but this is like be my first one, so like people will buy it just because it's my first one. But I just like, kind of like movies, the first weekend is important, but if you have an 80% drop off the second weekend, it's probably not going to do that well.
Right.
So I don't know what the second comic is going to be like. I'm writing it now, and it's really good, but if people kind of buy the first one, like, all right, I bought the first one because it's Chavez's first one, and then the second one, like 200 people buy, then I'm cooked. Then it's not. Then it's not.
Yeah, I think it's a reality for like the big publishers for sure. I don't think that's where you're gonna end up. Like, to be honest, like, I mean, I know we don't know each other. I haven't read your work or whatever, but I think like if you're a member of this community and these small communities that are popping up within comics, there is like a general, like, if your first issue was good and you're not a jackass to people in real life, I think the tendency of people to support your work, I think that'll carry you, man. I'll speak for myself. Like, I don't have a name or whatever, but like over the last X amount of years, like kind of doing commission work, like within the art community and whatever, people that buy commissions from me will buy the covers that I do, just just from the goodwill I've built. And it's not something I take for granted, but they don't have to do that. Like, I'm not, like, whatever, but I think you underestimate like the power of being in these communities. I think people will support you, man.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely trying to be conservative. VeVe Zombie says he's like the fourth person that says like I'll stack it, and we'll do rewards for that too. Like, if anyone gets a certain mint number, or if they stack the comic, or if they get the entire set from the comic through the secret rare, then we'll give away either tokens from daCAT or Sharby or wherever. So like the first one will sell out, and that'll be great. But yeah, I think the subsequent second, third, and fourth because I have ideas for at least the first 10. That'll be contingent on like actually how well it's written. And obviously, even if it's amazing story, if the art sucks, then people are like, okay, it's not visually pleasing. Like, there are people there are great video games out there where it looks like poop. So like half the people that would have played it won't play it. Obviously, I love old school video games. I got the.
Hey man, listen, I grew up on like Prince of Persia and shit. So like.
There you go.
What's his name, Madman?
Oh, it's a bad. It's a Vegeta reference from Dragon Ball Z where he wears the shirt. But yeah, I love old school video games. Zelda, Mario, Yoshi. Kirby.
Oh yeah.
I got Donkey Kong and Pokeball over there, so I got a lot of.
Nice.
Hey fellas, I got a hard stop here in a couple minutes.
Yeah, I have two 16-ounce Michelob Ultras in me, so I have to pee real bad. So we could end it here. We could.
Awesome.
Let's do this again. This is fun. When the third comic comes out, we'll have you guys on.
Yeah, man. Great therapy
I love
session,
you.
actually.
Yeah,
Yeah,
great.
this was really fun. Thanks for kind of keeping us in check and keeping the show on the rails, I guess, and the therapy
We went
hour.
off the rails a while ago.
Man, it was great to meet you, man. Will, man, every time we've hung out, it's always a pleasure.
Absolutely, man. Bro, I can't wait to see you at the next con, man. We gotta have some dinner together.
100%.
Are you guys going to San Diego Comic-Con?
Won't be able to. Oh, I'm sorry. You're talking to Ranga.
No,
Sorry,
no.
my bad.
No, I'm skipping San Diego this year.
Are you going to New York Comic-Con?
Probably, yes.
Yeah.
All right.
I
New
applied,
York.
so hopefully I get in.
All right, New York. Let's go. Let's get this bread.
Awesome,
All right.
man.
Obviously, I'll see you guys before then. I'll talk to Carl and be like, "Hey, bring these guys on again next time that y'all have a comic."
That's
All right,
rad.
cool. Thanks
Thanks
guys.
again.
I'll talk to y'all
Thanks
later.
again for having me on, man.
Have a great
Appreciate it.
weekend.